this video, I'm going to show you how to create fake drone shots from anywhere in the world. I'll go over exactly how I take low resolution textures and make them look photorealistic. So grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's get straight into it. First thing you want to do is go to Google and type in Google Earth Studio. Once you're logged in, it should look something like this. Now we're just going to go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to change the frame rate to 24 FPS, but I'm going to leave the rest all as is. And as you can see, the app is launched and it is completely web-based. You don't need to download anything. Type in the address of wherever you want to get a drone shot of. As you can see, it's going to take you exactly to the address you typed in. Now, I'm just going to go to the exact spot where I shot the example clip. So it's somewhere in Monaco. There's this sort of viewpoint that oversees the entire city. So as you can see, this is the same spot I used in the example, and we're going to be recreating that. If you still haven't figured out how to move around, just click and drag your mouse and it's going to move you around. And if you double click it, you're going to be able to orbit around the subject. Here, I'm just trying to find the perfect starting point for our animation. But once you found it, go to add attribute and add every single option. Doing so will give us full control over the time of day, the clouds, and many other options that are going to make it easier for us to get good results. I usually set the time of day to sunrise or sunset to make sure the textures don't look too flat. Once you're happy with how this looks, just go ahead and click the keyframe toggle, which is going to set the camera's position. I'm going to turn off the target so it doesn't follow a specific subject. And we're also going to play around with the field of view, which is essentially the lens you are using for the drone. I find that for this specific location, 15 seems to work best. Now, another cool thing you can do is keyframe the field of view, and by changing the value over time, it is going to give you a dolly zoom effect. Once you're done setting the first keyframes, move your cursor around to the end of your animation. I'm going to be doing 200 frames, and position your camera to exactly what you want it to look like at the end. Have some fun with all the different values. You can pan the camera, tilt it, roll it. There's a bunch of cool stuff you can do. But as you can see, I'm just going to play around with the panning a little bit and maybe also get that dolly zoom effect by setting a different field of view value towards the end. Once you're happy with how everything looks, head to the rendering options, set a name for your file, and you can either choose between a JPEG sequence or a MP4 file. But make sure to set the dimensions to 4K, which is going to give us the absolute best results. Next, hit the trademark with a custom position and drag it all the way to the corner, and make sure the map style is set to clean and the texture quality to high. Once all of that's done, we can hit render and wait for it to load. Now we can move over to After Effects and let the real fun begin. The very first thing we're going to do is import that JPEG sequence and convert it into a MP4. I'm just going to make sure it is set to 24 FPS and render it out. The reason we're doing this is for performance sake, but once you're done rendering, just import it back in, and as you can see, we now have a video file. The first thing I like to do is to motion track the footage, so we're going to do just that by right-clicking it, hitting it with a track and stabilize and a track camera. As you can see, we now have some tracking markers to work with, so we're going to go ahead and select a large portion and create a null and a camera. We can reveal the null's position by hitting P on our keyboard, and we're going to create a fake atmosphere by using this smoke overlay you can download in the description. Just set the layer to 3D and copy and paste the null's position onto the smoke overlay itself. As you can see, it is now positioned properly in the scene, but we're going to scale it up and actually make it somewhat like a cloud. So I'm just going to flip it and add a circular mask that's going to polish it up. This is going to vary a lot from a scene to another, but in this specific case, I'm just going to scale it up quite a bit and set the blending mode to screen. We're using this trick to bring some more life to our scene, and since the environment is completely static, these little tricks go a long way. Now we can go ahead and create a new adjustment layer, position it right above our source footage, and add a Gaussian blur effect. We're going to use this to make it look a little less CGI and add a bit of softness to the textures. You don't need to go overboard with this, just stick to 4 or 5 and you'll be fine. Next thing you want to do is duplicate that source footage layer, get rid of the 3D marker, and add the depth scanner effect. It is a paid plugin, but it allows you to do so much, so I think it's totally worth it. Now set the base resolution to very high, both of these settings to medium, and we're going to change the model to V2 large indoor. Next, you'll want to set the samples to around 8 and change the mapping mode to raw. This is going to allow us to apply effects based on depth, which is going to be crucial when dealing with camera lens blur. And talking about that, let's just go ahead and create an adjustment layer and add the camera lens blur effect onto it. Make sure to set the blur map layer to our depth map and set it to effects and masks. As you can see, when we increase the blur, it is now based on the depth map we created earlier. You can play around with the focal distance and choose to focus on the foreground or the background, but for this example, we're going to be focusing on the city in the background. If you want to give it that anamorphic look, you can set the aspect ratio to 0.1 or 0.2, and it's going to stretch the bokeh vertically. Depending on your blur settings, you might see some artifacts like this line right here, and the way we're going to fix that is by going back to the depth map layer, adding a Gaussian blur effect to it, and just turning it up until it disappears. Finally, we're just going to blend everything together by creating an adjustment layer and adding the lumetri effect to it. This part is going to heavily depend on preferences, but I like to add a bit more green to the tint, play around with the contrast ratios, the shadows and everything, add a little bit of a vignette, and as you can see, I feel like this looks even more cinematic than it already was. The last thing you can do is double check your atmosphere is matching with your new color grade, so the way I like to do that is by adding a tint effect to the smoked overlays and just matching it with the overall vibe of the footage. If you want to get rid of the watermark, just add a letterbox overlay, and as you can see, here's what we started out with and here's the final result. That pretty much wraps it up for today, guys. I hope y'all enjoyed, and if you're trying to level up your edits, make sure to check the first link in the description down below where you can find all of my packs and plugins. And on that note, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.